Okay, friends, this week we are in Matthew chapter 7, which is the last chapter of the Sermon on the Mount. Next week we jump back into more narrative. Jesus walking around, interacting with people, all those things. Matthew 5 through 7, the Sermon on the Mount, is the longest bit of sustained speech in Matthew. So as we wrap this up this week, we'll be bringing in some kind of threads from 5 and 6, kind of tying some things together and seeing some new stuff also. But keep this in mind. What is Matthew 5 through 7? What's the Sermon on the Mount? It is Jesus teaching us how best to live in this world, how best to be fully human, how best to live, how to walk in the way that he's teaching. Okay, so how does chapter 7 start? Today we're going to be looking at just these first few verses, the first 5 verses. Judge not, that you not be judged. You've heard this, like, don't be judgmental, don't judge others. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck in your brother or your sister's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? This is the image that he paints. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there's a log in your own? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of the other person's eye. So the image that he's painting is of one being judgmental in the sense they notice what's wrong with other people, but they're ignoring what's going on with themselves. Now, let's talk about how this is often, I think, misused or misinterpreted. The way that this is sometimes used is to say that you should have an opinion about nothing. And you certainly shouldn't have an opinion about other people's thoughts or actions or behaviors. And you definitely shouldn't share those things. It's the way that sometimes this is used. Somebody else is like, what do you think about whatever? You say, who am I? Who am I to judge? Or somebody does have an opinion about something. You say that person's just judgmental. Okay? What Jesus is after here is not being bland and not having an opinion on anything, which again, often I think is the way that this kind of plays out. No. We actually can disagree with people, and we actually can strongly believe that some people's actions or thoughts are not right, and we can do that without being judgmental. So what is it that Jesus is talking about when he's talking about judgmental? He's not talking about not having an opinion on anything. Well, what's he talking about? Okay, let's think about it this way. What does it mean to be a judge? Or you can think about a judge today. Okay, what does it mean to be a judge? Well, a judge is someone who is given the authority to determine like somebody else's guilt or innocence, and to determine their future in many cases. You know, what the consequence will be. What else is a judge? Well, a judge in the relationship that they're in with other people, it's just a relationship that moves in one way. You know, it's just that I pronounce judgment on you. And then the last, of course, is that there's not actually a real relationship. There's not like a sustained long-term relationship between the judge and the person that they're tasked with judging. Jesus is saying that's not going to work. That kind of thing is not the way that you're to treat other people, where you kind of sit at a distance, no relationship with them. The critique just moves in one direction, and you are pronouncing some kind of judgment over like their future, like what's going to happen to them or who they are, like at their core or something like that. He says that we're not going to do that. But you'll notice this. He says, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there's a log in your own? Well, notice this. This is the part that we often miss. What is implied here is the point. What's implied here is that we should be in the business of being able to help our brother or our sister with their speck. It's not saying, hey, don't even be worried about somebody else's speck. It's not saying that. It's saying don't be so concerned about other people's speck when you got a log in your own. I mean, ultimately, we actually, in the picture that Jesus is painting, want to be in a position where we can help each other with our specks. Well, then, how do we go about this? I mean, how do we help one another without being judgmental? Well, it seems like there are three things that are really important. Here's number one. Number one is that all of this be rooted in relationship. That you know people. That you spend time with them. That if we're going to talk about somebody else's speck, that we do that in the context of an ongoing, caring relationship. Part of what this teaches me is that I should be less concerned about the specks in the eyes of people that I don't know, or people that I don't really like, and therefore I'm not really in relationship with. I should be less concerned with the specks of other people and more concerned with, helping the people that are close to me. One way to think about it is that those of us in the church, we should be more concerned about the specks that are in each other's eyes rather than the specks that are in everybody else's. Now, this is spoken to a group of people that Jesus is forming into his earliest followers. Okay, number two. Not only should we do this in the context of a relationship, but we should do this in the context of a relationship that moves in both directions. We're not to be judges that just point out what's happening in other people, but we do it in the context of sitting across from a coffee table where we help each other. That if you're going to be so concerned about the speck in somebody else's eye, you need to also have a relationship with them where they're pointing out the log in your eye. I mean, remember, the point of getting rid of the log is so that you can help the other person with the speck. It's done in the context of a relationship, and it's done in the context of a relationship that moves in both directions. And then finally, it's done in a way where we don't presume to cast like a verdict on somebody. Meaning that what a judge does is that they determine guilt and innocence, and they determine that person's future with a sentence. We don't do that. We can point out the areas where other people need to grow in the context of relationship, but we don't presume to know what will or won't happen to that person. What we do is, we trust that person to God. So we have these kinds of conversations in the context of a relationship where we are also willing to receive feedback. And we do this knowing that ultimately we are not the judge over this person, but that God is. And when you see it this way, you see that this is not just some kind of like statement that gets us off the hook about having an opinion on anything. It's not about that. What it's about is it's about how to, in a loving and a caring way, to help each other, to hold each other accountable, and to disciple each other. Okay. I hope this helps. In our next Bible study, which is going to be tomorrow, we're going to look again at a different passage where we again see a way that is often misinterpreted, and we're going to look at a more faithful way to take a look at it. God bless you, friends. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you tomorrow.